welcome to my channel. Just a quick content warning, I'm going to be talking about self-harm, suicide, depression, overdose, and violence against women, in case you may find those themes triggering. So this tells the story of Flo, a well-known radio presenter who is an advocate for women's issues. We find out that she's divorced, her husband lives across the street, and they have quite an amicable relationship. They co-parent, and she has two teenagers, a son Max and a daughter named Lou. She's 15 years old, and Lou's been having a rough go of puberty. So the story kind of begins when Flo finds Lou in her bed, having OD'd on alcohol and pills in an apparent suicide. This begins Flo's journey of finding out what could have possibly led to this. We learn that Lou was rebellious, she partied, she wore revealing clothes, she swore, she lashed out at her mother, but in the weeks leading up to her death, Flo says that she seemed even more aggressive and unhappy. One evening, Flo sees that Lou has a black eye, and we eventually learn that she has a much older boyfriend who is violent. He's the one who hit her. Lou is pretty resistant throughout, but Flo decides to keep Lou by her side, taking her to work, and it seems like they have some tender moments, but things are tense between them. Eventually, Lou tells Flo in a very sweet way almost that she's not going to disappoint her mother anymore, and we see that this is the point where she's made up her mind and it's kind of a goodbye in a way. Lou does also leave a note saying that she just couldn't do it anymore. Because Flo is a public figure, people know of her, and she gets approached by a lady from a company called Reset, telling her that she can go back in time and possibly change the outcome. The lady makes a prediction of one of Flo's critics and what he's going to say the next day on his show. The next day, Flo hears this. It's exactly as the woman predicted, and she realizes that there might be something to this Reset company. She calls them, and an answering machine gives her some options, and she gets to choose how far in the past she wants to go. She decides to go 1 month in the past. So in the 1 month reset, she tries to prevent Lou from being assaulted by her boyfriend Lex, but Flo herself gets assaulted instead. The police are called, and Lou is upset because charges get brought against Lex. This puts more strain on the mother and daughter relationship, and of course Flo tries to fix things by trying to meet her daughter halfway. She offers to drop the charges if Lex comes over for dinner so that she can meet him. At that dinner, it's pretty clear to the mother that it's not really that serious between them, at least for Lex anyway. Lou is in love with him. Eventually, Lou decides to leave her mother and live with her father shortly thereafter, but the father also has a difficult time getting through to her. Flo also remembers that her son Max had told her that Lou was sending sexual photos and texts to some of his friends, flirting with them. He was really embarrassed by it, and the siblings never really got along. In this 1 month reset, Flo decides to hack into all of Lou's social media accounts to try and see what's going on. Obviously, this makes things so much worse when Lou finds out her privacy has been violated and the trust is further damaged between mother and daughter. Finally, in this 1 month reset, we come to the day of her suicide. So up until this point, everything that Flo has tried hasn't proven successful at repairing her relationship with Lou or changing the trajectory of Lou's life. During her radio show, she realizes that this is the day that Lou dies, and she sees that Lou isn't there at the radio station, and she's normally supposed to be. She goes out looking for Lou, and she finds her outside Lex's apartment begging him to let her in, and obviously he's not doing that. She's absolutely distraught, and we see that she has more bruises on her arm, but she goes home with her mother. She doesn't make a reference to suicide then because she can't cope with the heartbreak and the rejection from Lex, and Flo decides to call her husband and asks for help. It seems as though the trust between Flo and Lou is even more broken, but Lou's father has a slightly better relationship with her. Flo tells her husband basically that Lou is really in trouble. Here we also get to see some scenes of Lou's childhood, and she was for the most part an unhappy child as well. Flo takes her along to her women's advocacy campaigns, and she doesn't really seem to enjoy the spotlight or being there. Anyway, after the fallout from the situation with Lex, they end up sending her to a facility for help because Lou isn't eating, she's not sleeping, she's not coming out of her room, and the doctors do say that she's depressed and she could be a danger to herself. So this is the best place for her, but obviously she feels betrayed by her parents for doing this, and she begs them to take her home. Things also start to come out about Flo's marriage, that she stopped taking the pill behind her husband's back and became pregnant with Lou. They start to almost blame each other together in an attempt to find out where things went wrong with Lou. Ultimately, Flo decides to do another reset, and she decides to go back 1 year in an attempt to change her daughter's decision makings from before she met Lex. So Flo feels that Lou's self-esteem issues might stem from the fact that she wasn't chosen for the Ballet van Vlaanderen, which is the ballet of Flanders, and she talks to Lou about the pressure she's feeling in ballet and body image issues. She asks if Lou would rather prefer to dance in a more laid-back dance group, and Lou agrees. She also tells Lou that she can quit working in the fast food restaurant and focus on the dancing, and obviously Flo does this because this is where Lou is going to eventually meet Lex. Things seem to be looking a little promising. Lou is still having some issues, but she's happy in her new dance school. I thought it was interesting that we see now that there is another girl who's working at the fast food restaurant where Lou was working, and she's now just gotten together with Lex. This show doesn't go too much into the consequences of time travel outside of this family. We all know that this girl is going to suffer abuse, but Flo came to save her daughter, and so there's not much that she can do. We see that Lou's parents' divorce really bothers her, but later on it will be revealed that her problems predate the divorce. So the family decides to go on a weekend away together, and when the parents decide to go back to the hotel after dinner, Lou and her brother go to a bar. We see that Lou is having a little too much fun, and she hooks up with a really dodgy older guy. It seems that all roads are kind of leading to that same moment, and after Lou's parents and her brother search for her all over Brussels, they find her half dressed in the backseat of a car. After this, Lou tells her parents that she can't do it anymore. So this is basically what she wrote on the note. So in Flo's mind, this is a bit of a trigger, and so obviously she tries to reset, but she has to relive that whole year before she can reset, so she's stuck here. We find out a little bit what Lou's issues are. Her mother, Flo, is extremely successful, well-known and liked, and Lou feels as though she can't live up to that. She compares herself to her mother a lot, and that is some of what is at the heart of the issue. She has extreme self-esteem issues, she suffers from self-hate, and she feels that she can never be as pretty or as skinny as her mother. She seems to resent her mother, and she thinks of herself as a hopeless case, and that she only got into ballet in the first place because her mother is famous. So she doesn't even believe in any of her own talent and skill. At this point, we see that Flo and her husband Nick are actually pretty supportive. They're doing all they can for Lou, but Lou is pretty unhappy. And then we see the son Max, who notices that Flo has been so preoccupied with Lou that he feels a little bit left behind. So the whole point of Flo going back into the past is really to try and change Lou's trajectory, so she's very focused on Lou, but obviously there is another child who notices this and feels left behind. Lou ends up going on vacation to Sardinia with her father and her father's new girlfriend. She falls in love with a guy on vacation. For him though, it's just a fling. Lou comes home, she's devastated about it. Again, she says those words that she can't do it anymore, and by the end of the 1 year reset, she ends up in a center for help. Again, she feels betrayed by this. Flo then decides to do a 10-year reset. So we go back in time to when Lou was 5 years old and Flo is still married. She decides not to take up a radio job because she wants to spend more time with her children. We see that Lou is already struggling though. She's having trouble making friends at school. She hits a girl twice. She struggles with her homework. And so yeah, her problems definitely predate the divorce. And Lou is just already a really anxious child, and a therapist says that Lou might be sensing some of her mother's anxiety. Her husband senses this as well. So obviously Flo, being back in time and knowing how things are going to happen, we as the viewer know the source of this anxiety. We see that Lou really enjoys cooking and baking. She seems genuinely happy when doing both, but when her gran, so Flo's mother, buys her an easy bake oven, Flo is really upset by this, and she says that it enforces gender stereotypes. Likewise, when the gran is reading to Flo and Max, she's reading a fairy tale about a princess waiting for her prince. Flo interrupts them and says something about princesses having to do things for themselves and not waiting for a prince. Flo doesn't let the gran finish the story. We see that Flo's ideals, wanting to liberate her daughter from stereotypical girls' things and behaviors, actually has the opposite of the intended effect, and it's as though she's making those choices for her daughter. Her and her mother have some discussions about this, and it's the typical cross-generation difference of opinion. The gran sees no no problem with girls enjoying traditional girls things, and we see that Lou really enjoys playing with the easy bake oven. This does seem to resonate with Flo because at one point we see a moment of realization when Flo sees just how happy Lou is in the kitchen. We fast forward in the 10-year reset to when the kids are teenagers, and we see that Lou is being a little bit distant and Flo is getting these migraines and she feels tired. We find out that Lou is a little distant because she's also in a reset, having come from a future where Flo had died from cancer. At this point, both Lou and Flo's resets intersect, and it turns out that Lou went back 5 years. She then tells Flo that she's going to be diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they start seeking treatment. Lou knows of the reset because she found the number on her mother's phone after she had passed away, but she didn't quite believe it at first. She did it though, and it worked. And she tells Flo that she ends up finding her way. After a bout of depression, after her mother dies, she rediscovers doing what she loves, which is cooking and baking, and things turn out well for her. The show ends when we see Flo being wheeled into an operating theatre, but we don't get to see the outcome. Because Lou did tell her mother early, the cancer was detected a lot earlier, so I guess from that Flo does live in this timeline, but that's just my interpretation. So this was an interesting show because even though it has time travel, that's not really the focus of it at all. I don't even know if this can be classified as sci-fi because that's very much all happening on the background. We don't get to see how reset works. Basically, the traveler gives them their credit card number, and then two people in an SUV show up, give them a shot that knocks them out, and the next time the traveler wakes up, they're in their reset past. We never find out who or what this shadowy organization is, which sounds about right for a shadowy organization. One gripe, I don't know why they gave so much screen time to Flo's young lover. I guess we find out that he means more to her than even she thought, but I didn't care about the storyline at all. Otherwise, this is a good show. It's really bingeable. I still haven't decided yet whether they stuck the landing in the end. I was sure that the migraines had something to do with the time travel and there'd be more of a thriller sci-fi aspect, and I was really looking forward to that. So I was a little bit let down by the cancer storyline, but at the same time, it was really nice to see this family all pull together and support each other throughout that. You know, they've been through a lot and you are rooting for them. Anyway, I would recommend this show. It keeps you on your toes throughout. It's not the biggest time investment, and if you're not expecting sci-fi, it's a good family drama. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.